Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Bucks County's webinar on successful strategies for women. This is the first of a series of two events. The first one is Envisioning Your Business Beyond Today, and then on June 28th, Strengths-Based Leadership. So I hope you're signed up for both. Just before we begin, I just want to introduce myself. My name's Linda Zangrilli. I'm the current chapter chair for Bucks County. And for those of you who don't know SCORE, I'd just like to spend a few minutes giving you a SCORE commercial. SCORE is a national nonprofit organization. We have some 350 chapters and between 10 and 13,000 volunteers all over the country. We have a very, very simple mission, and that is to help small business start, grow, and prosper. We do that through webinars like this. And here in Bucks County, we have these webinars just about every Tuesday at the same time. And we publish them well in advance so you can see the full scope of what we're doing throughout the end of the year. And we also do that through free mentoring. So what that means for you is if you're starting a new business, or maybe you have a new business and you're down the road a little bit and you need some help, please, please, please reach out to us. Here in Bucks County, we have at least 70 people who come from all walks of life. We cover the entire county as well as Eastern Montgomery County. So these people come from corporate America. They come from owning their own businesses, but they have the skill set that you need to get yourself up and running and to get profitable, which is a key. So I hope that you'll take advantage of what we have to offer, both SCORE Bucks County, which can be found at buckscounty.score.org. And that is in the chat box if you need to refer to it. Please, please, please take advantage of the free mentoring services that we offer. Enter that website and just say, I need a mentor, click in, and then we will take it from there. Someone will assign a mentor to you. Your mentor will contact you and you'll be off and running. There's no expiration date on mentoring. You can have as many or as few as you need to get yourself up and running. So I urge you to take advantage of it. We have many, many resources. Our SCORE.org, which is the national organization, offers many, many, many webinars and also resource guides that you can take advantage of. So I urge you to take advantage of all that. And if you're out there and you say, hey, that's a good cause, I'd like to volunteer, you also should go to our website, buckscounty.score.org, and say, I'd like to help out. I want to become a member. And once again, we'll take it from there and contact you. So that's my spiel for today, but I have a few housekeeping items. You don't need to take copious notes. This session is being recorded, and you will all receive a copy of the recording as well as the slides just after the webinar is finished. Please hold your questions, put them all in the Q&A. We will address all questions at the end of the webinar. And please refrain from advertising your business in the chat as a courtesy. Okay, well, without further ado, I'd like to bring on the gentleman who is our seminar chair for SCORE Bucks County. He's the gentleman who finds all these wonderful speakers that we bring to you. And today's speaker is actually a SCORE client. So we're really, really excited to hear from her. So Ed, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Linda. And thank you all for joining us. I think you're going to find this a very interesting presentation. We're very fortunate to have Nicole McCabe with us. She's the Alliance Director of Microsoft Partnership at Snowflake. And she's responsible for the overall strategic relationship between Snowflake and Microsoft. And prior to that, she worked as a VP Managing Director of Microsoft Partnership with SAP. She's had over 25 years experience in the technology area industry rather. And she's created the unique ability, or she has the unique ability to not only establish a strategic plan, but to translate the plan into one that is executionable. I'm going to turn it over to Nicole now so that she can start the presentation. I think you're going to find it fascinating. Put the questions in the Q&A and we'll take care of them at the end. Nicole?
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today and talk through our presentation. I'll just sort of recap what Ed mentioned. So just a little bit about myself. I am a girl mom. This obviously drives a lot of my passion for continuing to support women, a dog mom and wife, and I love helping others succeed in being happy. So it's actually interesting. I thought I just came to this revolution, but my parents dumped a bunch of papers from when I was little off at my house when they were downsizing, and I went through them, and it was even goes back to kindergarten where teachers and friends called out, nope, she always makes me happy, or she tries to make me happy if I'm sad. So apparently it's not a new revelation for me. I've had it all my life. 25 years in the industry, 20 of which is specific to the tech industry, but certainly 5 in healthcare. And I also have a knack for seeing the whole picture and driving strategy to execution, as Ed said, right? And I think you'll find out later in the presentation, it's so important to really start to understand what you're good at and own it, right? Take pride in it, get confident around it. And so you'll see this theme, and when somebody asks me what I'm good at, this is what I'm good at. I am also a professional and personal coach. So I went through the Erickson Solution coaching program and received my diploma a year ago. So very active doing some professional and personal coaching. And then one of the most important things, and the reason why I'm here today, is that I am a SCORE mentee. So SCORE is a program that I happened upon a few years back when I had an idea on a business. And I just feel so fortunate to have been matched with my mentor, Krishna, and just the valuable expertise that he himself was able to provide, or individuals that he was able to bring to me so that I could have conversations with them. I just felt like, the program has so much value, and I can't speak enough about it, honestly. So that's why I'm here today. We'll go through a couple of different things about my career, just so you understand my own journey. So I am a graduate of Babson College. Babson, for those of you who don't know, is a very small business school up in New England. They are known for their entrepreneurial program. And so I went to Babson really just with the idea of, hey, I want to go into business, but not understanding all the different elements that a business could comprise, right? Between finance and sales and marketing and operations and technology. So started at Babson, and from there started at Frito-Lay, right? So Frito-Lay had a district sales training program. I think, honestly, I was more excited about getting free chips at that time in my life. But it was a great program and built a strong foundation for me to just continue my career. And I'll go through this quickly, but obviously moved to a couple of different roles, went to a consulting organization, which was great. I am somebody that is highly curious. So I love to constantly be learning. I love to push myself to the limit, see what I can do, get outside my comfort zone. I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but now that I'm older and wiser, I can self-reflect and say, nope, that's why I took all these different jobs, from Grant Thornton to PDI to SAP. And SAP, my most recent position, was covering the Microsoft relationship, but I was there for 17 years. And this is sort of the career trajectory that I took. And I think, it becomes important because later we'll talk about blind spots, and we'll also talk about strengths. And it was my strengths that really enabled me to go into SAP in more of an account management role, moved to marketing, and then out of nowhere, go to human resources. So diversity and inclusion is something that's very important, obviously, to me. I had never had it on my radar as a career. It was only when somebody came to me and said, hey, we need somebody to lead our gender equality initiative here at SAP. We think you'd be a great fit. Would you consider it? And I think at that point in my life, I was saying yes to everything just to see what would pop up. But I said, sure, let me go into this. What's it about? I ended up staying in that role for 5 years, leading SAP's gender equality program. I developed the strategy. I developed the execution of the strategy, moved their women in leadership numbers from 18% when I went in to 25% when I ended up leaving there, which sometimes people will say that doesn't seem like a lot. But when you're dealing with 100,000 person organization and a company where there's not a tremendous amount of turnover, that move was quite significant to get to the 25%. But it was at this time as well where women started to come to me to be mentored, or I found myself coaching a lot of women within SAP. And that's where I went on to get my coaching certificate. But it also became a time in my life where I was aware of the challenges that women face. I think I probably just took it for granted being a woman myself, but I did educate myself and understand all the challenges, which I'll bring to you today as well, that can help women just be successful in the workforce when they're aware of those. Partner management, we touched on that. I went into that. And then now, as of two months ago, actually, I'm with Snowflake, which is a data company. So this is sort of how I went from selling chips over to now managing partnerships for a data platform company. Some of the things we'll talk about today. So before we get started, when you're looking at your business plan, I do think it's important to understand the numbers behind it, right? What are some of the statistics on women entrepreneurs? Understanding why women start businesses. And as we go through that, I would ask each of you to reflect on why you started your own business. We'll talk about business planning as well. As women, we're very good task people. So as we develop our plan, sometimes we also try to do a lot. So how can you preserve and enhance your business plan to ensure that it's growing? And again, envisioning it sort of beyond today and what you originally thought. We'll talk about blind spots. I mentioned this quickly. What the heck are they? What's the impact that they can have on your business plan? And what does it mean to, know them and also mitigate them? And then the last piece of it, which will start to get into our second series, which is understanding strengths and weaknesses as a leader and sort of that impact that it can have on the business itself. So real quick, women entrepreneurs by the numbers. I think there's a ton of data out there on women entrepreneurs, to be honest with you. This one came from American Express, but I think it is fascinating that there is 13 million women-owned businesses, right? So there's a ton of businesses. The annual revenues for them are around 475,000, at least in 2021. And those businesses are also making an average profit of about 88,000 in 2021. So it'd be interesting to see how that grows as well with the pandemic. On average as well, right, women employ about 9.4 million workers. So there is a significant amount of impact to the economy and just that women are driving. So it's important, I always feel like, to understand the numbers, understand, as you look through these numbers, where do you fit in, right? And then obviously, how can you continue to grow not only the business, but the revenue and the bottom line for women? The pandemic, and we were talking about this just before the call started, but the pandemic was definitely harder on women-owned businesses. We're seeing this across the board with women in business, right? And then those that have started their own. So there was about a 5% impact on the male-owned businesses compared to 13% impact on the women-owned businesses. And there's a lot of speculation around why that is. I think over overwhelmingly, a lot of women were forced to make decisions throughout the pandemic in terms of maybe childcare as kids were home learning. There were women who, we see this in the numbers, had to leave the workforce. And then women also that had their own businesses that had to adjust based on the new demands of the world. So I think over the next year or two, it will be interesting. I'd be curious to see if there's going to now be an uptick in women-owned businesses, only because women will have to figure out how to supplement their income a lot of times. Here's some additional, and I won't dive too much into these, but this is additional information on small businesses specifically. And the top corner talks more about, from a women-owned business perspective, who's starting the businesses. You'll see everything here from, race to happiness level, to political parties and things like that. But also on the right-hand side, it talks about sort of the women-owned businesses and the number of years that they've been in business. So you're seeing a lot of about 50% of women-owned businesses have been in place for 0 to 5 years. So just under 5 years, right? So obviously the purpose of today is to help you continue to grow your own business beyond that 5-year threshold and planning for that. Now, top reasons why women start businesses. I think oftentimes people say, oh, it's the money, right? That people start businesses, or women specifically, but that is actually not the case at all. Women start businesses a lot of times for flexibility. And so here's just some insight in terms of why men start it, why women start it. Number one driver is flexibility. That's what they're seeking. That's why I think the pandemic was also so hard, much harder on women-owned businesses than men and women in the workforce than men. It's not to say that they weren't hit. It was just women were hit a little bit harder. You'll see here some of these ideas that they have around, somebody came to them with a partnership proposal, or maybe they developed a product. When you really start to dig into the psychology of why women have started businesses and some of the research, it comes down to a couple motivations, right? Women tend to start businesses, and this is not across the board, but they tend to start businesses because of some level of traumatic experience. I think that traumatic's a little dramatic, but it could have been that there was a loss of employment. It could have been like a pandemic, a shift and a new demand for childcare. It could be that from just a cost of living perspective, childcare got too expensive. They needed to have the flexibility, plus that income that needed to be supplemented. So you'll often see as well women starting businesses to supplement that income. They call sort of that life event a traumatic experience. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But nonetheless, it is a life event that tends to make women start businesses. Men actually are much more likely to go into business because of the financial component. So yes, they want the flexibility, but the main driver when you start to dig down deeper is that they don't want to sort of be told what to do. They want to be able to have opportunities. So it's that financial wealth and the idea of profitability that drives most men to start their own organization. So we'll touch on this, and this is the planning piece of it, right? So now, you've all started your own companies. Maybe you're thinking about starting a company. When you looked at that list on the previous slide, or even just self-reflect for a moment, think about, why did you start or are thinking about starting your own company? Is it the flexibility? Is it the ability to sort of control your own destiny? Is there a family life work balance or integration, as I call it sometimes, that you need to manage? So think about, reflect on why you each started, or are thinking about starting your company, because the planning piece of it becomes critical in helping you achieve that why, right? When you're starting your own company, when you have your company, maybe that you already started, think about the plan that you created, maybe the plan that you're working on. I know myself as I was working through my own plan with Krishna, my mentor, just thinking about the plan and then how frequent would I go back to even visit the plan. Sometimes we get so caught up in the execution of it that we forget to go back and revisit it. And the plan is everything, right? I mean, I recently saw the movie, I think it was King Richard is the movie I saw. And my children are so tired of me telling the story, but I had totally forgotten about this quote on the right-hand side, which is, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail, right? And I now tell my children this probably at least 3 times a week. They're tired of it, but it is true. It's not good enough to just even have the initial plan. It is those moments in time when you're going forward that you need to revisit the plan, because if you don't, and you're not following the plan and working the plan, you're just planning to fail. So when companies are planning successfully, what they've found is those that are planning successfully go back, revisit the plan frequently, they grow 30% faster, right? A lot of times they're attributing that to the fact that they are staying focused on what needs to be done to reach their business goals, so that and deliver ultimately the why that you started the business to begin with. They also grow at a rate of 71%, right? Fast growing companies all have plans in place, which I think is critical. They're more likely to get funding. So we hear this time and time again, especially with women and underrepresented groups. Funding is very difficult to get. So you need to have a strong business plan. You need to have a strong value proposition in terms of, here's my business and here's where I'm taking it. And here are some milestones that I want to reach. And I know there's a ton of information in the SCORE library around creating a strong business plan and also some funding. And then the last piece of it, as I mentioned, is just making sure that you're going back and revisiting the plan, right? When they're revisiting the plan, it increases the likelihood of success. And a lot of the reasons why they attribute that is because you're able to build in flexibility and adjust to the plan when you revisit it more frequently. You're also able to stay focused. I know myself, I am a multitasker, so I always have a bunch of different things going on. It is challenging for me to say, oh, wait, I have to go revisit the plan. But I remind myself it's absolutely critical that I don't get so far down the road with all these different items, and maybe I used half my time to focus on things that weren't important to my plan. So that revisiting the plan becomes so critical. And research has found as well, right? It does significantly increase the likelihood of success for your organizations. Also critical to the plan is understanding some of the biggest challenges, right? So as women, when we're building plans, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of challenges that we might need to address or just have awareness around. Social expectations is one of them. A lack of capital. We touched on this. Where is that money going to come from? If you need investments, how will you get those investments? Lack of support. I know when I had first started with my business concept, I did feel like I was on an island by myself. I was trying to find all these answers. I was researching at night. I am not a tech person. So I was trying to understand and learn technology. I'm not a legal person. I was trying to understand the legal aspects. And my head was spinning, honestly, until I came to SCORE and had my mentor. And then I sort of felt like, oh, here's somebody that can help me find these answers or give me guidance and advice. One of the biggest challenges is that lack of support. So I feel like with SCORE, for me anyway, that particular challenge was clearly addressed. That will continue as you grow your business, right? Even with SCORE and then beyond, as you're looking to add advisors maybe to your business. That lack of support is critical as you're building your plan in terms of how can I get support and advocates for my business. The networking piece of it is also a challenge. Personally, I'm not a huge networker, and that was a red flag for me when I started my own business plan. I thought, oh my gosh, my network is really limited to those that have the same expertise as myself. So I really had to make a conscious effort in terms of how can I start to expand my network, expand it into different industries, maybe that I was working on, expand it into different expertise as well, and then expand it into ultimately the target market that I was addressing with my plan. There is a lack of confidence for women. You see this all the time, and I'll get to this shortly, but one of the biggest challenge is that lack of confidence and wanting your plan to be at a certain place before you take the leap of faith. And then the work-life balance is also one, right? And it's a little bit chicken and the egg. Like we start businesses because maybe we wanted that work-life balance and we thought we could get it, but then it takes effort to get that plan, to get the business up and running. So how do you continue to manage that work and life balance, or I like to call it integration? I don't know if you're ever going to have one 50-50 in both categories. Sometimes the pendulum, at least for me, swings towards work. Sometimes it swings towards life. And I think that's fine, but it is trying to figure out how do you manage all of that. And then the last biggest challenge that was identified is just around, again, building that market access. How do you get into the market? Some of us have come from a field that maybe we started our business in or thinking about starting our business in, but if not, how do you get access to that particular market? Now that we know some of the challenges, which I think is you're going through and looking at your own plans, keep those in the back of your head. When you're revisiting the plan, even when you're starting the plan, these are some of the things that I always like to tell clients to do, right? Or keep an eye on. Identify your key milestones. I think this is a great thing about the plan. It's very clear that the milestones are out there, what you are working towards. It helps to keep that main goal in focus. So what is the goal of your organization? What are you striving for? Serves as your roadmap, right? When you have the goal, you have to backfill into, well, how am I going to get to that goal? What does my road look like specifically here? And when you have those sort of top three, it becomes a point of reference for success. I think it's sometimes very hard to see success when we're heads down and moving and doing all these different activities and are in and out of meetings, etc. But when you take the time to really stop and revisit your own business plan, it does become your reference to say, oh my gosh, I have done all of this work. And you reflect from ideation to wherever you are today. And there's a certain level of confidence that comes with looking back on your success and looking back at everything that you've done. When you're also revisiting the plan, it helps to identify the blind spots. And we're going to spend some time on this, but the blind spots become those things that could impact the plan, but they're also things that are easily identifiable when you're creating as well as revisiting your business plan. So we'll start with this, which is like first, what the heck is blind spots? How do we identify them? I love the second definition better, right? The first one, area in which one fails to exercise judgment or discrimination. I think that's good. It's very fluffy. But the second one was one I read in Entrepreneurial Blind Spots, which was a blog. And it's basically that one thing that we don't see, right? It becomes a constraint for growth. And as you're all looking at your businesses and looking at, how do you take your business beyond today? How are you going to grow it? It becomes absolutely critical to understand that blind spot. And, I feel like you're seeing logos up here. We've all seen these logos. We've seen, the impact or maybe heard of the impact that these blind spots had on the organizations, right? Blockbuster went from being, I think, the only place you could get, videos back in my day. I'm probably dating myself, to now pretty much being non-existent. I think the last store just closed, but they were overtaken by streaming, right? Netflix came in. Netflix was actually mailing CDs for you to look at, DVDs, and now they're streaming, right? So Barnes and Noble with Amazon, and you had the Kindle versus now they have the Nook, or just that brick and mortar bookstore versus online bookstore. So all of these companies had blind spots at some point in time. Some of them are no longer with us. Some of them are trying to reinvent themselves. I think the Limited's a good example of that. Now they were late in getting to e-commerce, right? That platform, by the time they got there, they pretty much had missed the boat. So now they're looking at, they licensed their brand, I saw recently, to companies like Boscov's and other big store retailers. But others have also been able to come through it. So you have Xerox, you have Kodak, where they had a blind spot. It became a challenge, but they've still been able to grow the business and really go back and revisit their plan and have to reflect on it in a different way to make sure that their business was sustainable over time. For yourselves and personally, right? So what can you do to start to understand your blind spot so that it doesn't start to impact your business and ultimately your goals? The most important is just self-reflection. I say this all the time to clients. Take time to self-reflect. I think it's the biggest gift we can give ourselves. When you're looking at your business, what experience do you have, right, that you're bringing to the business, that you can bring to the plan? I know when I looked at my business, there were definitely certain elements that I could bring to my plan, but it became clear what experience I did not have that was absolutely critical to my business, right? I mentioned technology, certainly legal experience. I didn't have any of that. I didn't have sales. So there were certain elements of my business that I knew I couldn't bring to it. So I needed to supplement. But there were also experiences that I've gathered over my career that I had covered, right? I had a lot of the answers to those particular components of my plan. Looking at it from, what are your weaknesses and what are your strengths? And we'll focus on the strengths again in our next series. We'll dive really deep into this, but this is something that I'm so passionate about, and I'll talk about it shortly. But understanding what weaknesses you have and what strengths you can bring as well is basically your blind spot, right? If you focus so much on your strengths that you ignore the weaknesses, you actually are just fostering and creating a blind spot for yourself. Where do you procrastinate? Think back to how you approach your businesses when if you're in the planning stage and haven't started it yet. At what point are you starting to procrastinate? For me, it was, and I feel like with clients as well, it tends to be we procrastinate on things that we don't know the answers to. So if we don't know the answers to those, you can probably be assured that they're probably a blind spot for you at that point in time. They don't always have to be a blind spot as you learn, but at that point in time, they are a blind spot. So when you're looking at even your plan and you're executing against your business plan today, what are things when you're executing that you tend to push down on the priority list, right? Are they critical to the execution of the business? Yes, no. Are you deprioritizing them because you're dreading doing them because you don't know the answers? Or is it truly because it's just not the priority of the business? So that's a great question to ask yourself as well. And then there's this confidence component, right? This whole self-confidence component, which, do you have too little? Oftentimes we saw this on the challenges. They'll say, oh, there's a confidence challenge. I mean, there must be 1,000 articles on it for women, but there's the flip side of it too, which is that we're too confident, right? And it's striking that balance between and confidence, because if you're too confident, maybe you think you know all the answers, but you could use a little extra help getting them. But if you don't have it, maybe it hinders your ability to get started with your business, right? So those are some things from a self-confidence perspective. I always like to take a pulse on and encourage everyone to take a pulse on where is your confidence when it comes to your plan? Do you feel like you might have too little? Or do you feel like you might have too much? And when you have too little, going back to the previous slide, honestly, look at everything that you've done to date, because that's where your confidence should come from. It takes a lot to move a business along. And so when you can reflect on it, if you're feeling kind of that low confidence, go back and look at everything that you've accomplished. And then the last piece of it as well, with regards to blind spots, is that fear of failure, right? Are we not getting started? Why aren't we getting started? Is it because we think we might fail? What will help you to gain reassurance that no, what you're working on will be successful? Some of the top ways. So now, when you do the self-reflection, then you look at, okay, I feel like I have a good understanding of my blind spots, or maybe I need to just get another opinion on them. So here's some ways that you can go about really confirming or identifying your blind spots in addition to what I talked about. One is always around being open and asking for feedback. This is really hard. I know it personally is really hard, but it's something that when I was working in gender equality and working with a lot of women and building a lot of programs to help women be successful, it's something that became so absolutely critical, right? Ask people, what is your impression of me? What's your feedback? Where can I improve? What do I do well at? But when you ask, also be open to the response, right? And we'll hear it all the time. Feedback's a gift. I truly believe feedback is something that people give to help someone else be better. So, if I go back to sort of my core, I like to bring out the best in people. I like to see people happy. Feedback is helping someone do that. So when someone's giving it to you, be open to it for sure, and thank them, because this ultimately is going to help you and your business be successful. And it's something that you can build into your plan. When you're looking at your plan itself, right? And we'll go through and I'll show you an exercise on this, which I feel like is really insightful. But when you're looking at your strategic plan, what is inherently known to you and what is not? So when you're looking at the idea and then you start to go through the whole process, what are those questions that you can quickly answer and what are the ones that you can't? Certainly partnering with a mentor and coach at SCORE. I know for me, again, going back to my mentor, Krishna, he was incredibly helpful in just identifying, asking questions. And those questions helped me identify, oh, this is a blind spot. I never thought about that. And I should probably take that into consideration. And then the last one is around just taking the time for assessments and that self-reflection. And I'm going to go over some assessments that I feel are pretty good. I've taken one of them particularly, and it was life-changing. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But assessments, the more that you can just understand yourself, understand your motivation, understand your blind spots, you will be better off and your plan will be better off. Real quick, this is a great resource. It's the PwC Personal Brand Book. It's a bigger, obviously the topic's a lot larger than what we're talking about here. It's really developing and honing your personal brand. But I do feel like there's elements in this resource that are very good to have in understanding who you are as an individual, as well as, identifying those blind spots and starting to identify also your strengths. And when you look through this brand book, and these slides will be shared, it'll help you do things like identify individuals, right? Like, who should you ask for feedback? What are some questions that you can even ask those individuals? You don't want, am I good at this? Am I good at strategic planning? Yes, no, right? You really want to get them to think and explain why you are good at something or why they feel like you need to work on something, right? But also when they do that, you're going to hear the awesome stuff, but you're going to hear the not so awesome stuff, right? So this resource here, I put it in because I do feel like if you're struggling with, okay, how do I get feedback, or how would I even go about identifying that particular blind spot? I do feel like there's elements of that personal brand workbook, which is online, that could help each of you to start to go through that process and think about it. The other thing that we talked about was, I said, look at your business plan. What's inherently known, what's not known, right? This is a good timeline. I use this in coaching quite a bit. So it's a timeline, and you look at it from the standpoint of where you are today versus where you want to go. So if we look at a business, and this is high level stages of businesses, but when you look at sort of that ideation and where you are today, ask these questions. What's your idea? What's sort of the to be state? And then start to look at each of these bullets. When you're looking at the plan component of it, do you know your vision? Is there competition? How are you going to market it? If you go through these and say, if you had to put a check mark next to those that you knew and strike out those that you don't know, the ones that you strike out are typically where your blind spot is. It doesn't mean it always has to stay there. That's why we revisit the plan. But it does mean that's where you're going to need some help or advice or guidance in just getting answers to those questions, because everything that you see here, for the most part, is a critical element of the plan and supporting your long-term business goals. So the timeline exercise, you can just do it on a piece of scrap paper, or take this slide and just slash, those that you don't know and put a check mark next to those you do. But it's great if you have a plan to revisit it against these. If you don't have a plan, it's a good checklist of things just to keep in mind. Assessments. That was the other piece that I talked about. I am obsessed with assessments. I think it's, for me personally, I thought I knew myself. I mean, I think I was probably 20 years into my 25-year career, and I know what I'm strong at, and I know what my weaknesses are. But I was defining them not in the correct way, I'll say. And there was a gentleman, you'll see him in the middle here, Marcus Buckingham. And I pulled him in to do some work at SAP when I was leading the gender equality topic. And I will say, for me, it was life-changing. And it was life-changing because of how he defined strengths versus weaknesses. And to be very elementary about it, basically, one of his examples was, as parents, if you think about parents and your child brings home a report card and they, might have 2 A's, a B, and maybe they have a C in science. Inherently, and this is how it was growing up for me, it was, what can you do to bring your science grade up from a C to an A? How can we move the lowest thing and focus on what you're not doing well at, so that you can do well at that? And Marcus's philosophy is, why focus on something that they are inherently not good at? Focus on taking what they're great at. So focus on those A's and how can they be better at it? And how can you help the child explore more? And it carries over to your career, right? How can you focus on what not only you're good at, but what you enjoy doing? So those are the two components, right? What you enjoy doing, what you're good at. Instead of maybe what you're good at, but you procrastinate doing. For me, when I got to my career and I did my assessment, I was great at project planning. Project management, project planning, I could do it. But I didn't really enjoy it, right? And I'm sure there was someone else that could do it faster and just as good, if not better. But because I was good at it, I kept getting pinned into these project management types of roles. And it wasn't really until I understood this concept that Marcus put out there that I said, wait a minute. I took the assessment, and you'll see it at my introduction slide. I had influencer and advisor. So he has 9 different categories of what you could be good at. And mine was influencer and advisor. And when I looked at it, it was spot on in terms of my strengths, but also what I enjoyed doing. And that became my talk track. So when I talk about and referenced in my introduction, I know what I'm good at. I know I'm good at getting strategy to execution, it also gave me this great sense of confidence because I know where I'll be successful. And I know, not only from this assessment, the assessment sort of helped me hone in on and focus on what in previous jobs I've done. As I move forward, what do I want to look for in a role? And all of those are basically roles, jobs, businesses that will help to leverage my strengths, right? So these are sort of three. I used the middle one. I've also done the one to the far right. It's a saboteurs assessment. That is a free assessment. It's by Dr. Shirzad Shamin, and he's fantastic. I took his positive intelligence program as a coach. But all of these, basically what they're going to do is give you more insight into yourself. So Clifton Strengths, that is one that comes with a fee. But Strength Finders is offering this free for a limited time because of the pandemic. And then the Saboteurs assessment is also free. So if you're up for taking an assessment, if you're up for sort of tackling that self-reflection and addressing some confidence or even gaining additional confidence, I highly recommend looking at one of these or all of these programs. So I touched on confidence here and my own confidence, right? When I got the report back that said, oh, you're an influencer and advisor, at first I chuckled and laughed and said, that's no way that's true. And as I read through it, I got more confidence, right? Well, when I started to Google for this presentation, are there links between blind spots and confidence? I mean, there were probably over 722 million Google results, everything from blogs to articles to organizations that help women address it. And I did put the word women in there as well. So this is not necessarily a new topic, is my point. There's a plethora of information out there, but I am a big proponent of when you know your strengths, when you know your blind spots, your confidence will come. We see it in the business world all the time. I actually recently went through this myself, where you're applying for jobs. And if you meet 100% of the criteria, on average, women will apply for those jobs, right? Whereas a male who only meets 50% of the criteria will apply for the job, right? He's got room to grow. And I was laughing because, when I was going through my own job search, it was a peer of mine and I had, applied for my job and gotten my job. And he said, hey, I'm going to apply for this job. And it was the next level up. And I thought, oh, that's so funny that I'm actually, I am part of the statistic, I guess, even though there was room for me to grow and learn. So, we hear these things around fake it till you make it. That's advice that will often be given to women around, getting confidence. And I think that's always something to balance, right? We want to be able to stretch ourselves. You should stretch yourself, but you shouldn't stretch yourself to the point where, that comes from the fact that, your confidence is increasing. You are owning the work that you're doing. You're owning the success that you're having. And so you no longer feel like that imposter syndrome or think in the back of your mind, oh, when are they going to figure me out? Right. And then the third one that we have a lot of times is the perfectionist. And I am I sort of operated, everything had to be perfect. And then over time that went away. And for it. What the answer might be today will be totally different in 6 months because the field goal is constantly moving. And so I know some of us might have that perfectionist in us. And I would just say, the more that you know what you're good at, that becomes your perfection definition. So for me, as an example, again, I know I'm good at strategy to execution. I can pretty much perfect that because, that's my strength. That's where I focus. And inherently, it's what I'm good at. My confidence comes from that. I don't need to be, the perfect project planner or perfect in all these other areas, because that sort of becomes my definition of perfect, if you will. Confidence simplified. So we've talked about it. Again, I go back to sort of these blind spots, but when you are good at something, and you'll hone that in as you identify, self-assessments, talking with people, looking at your plan. But when you're good at something and that something makes you happy, so you don't dread it, it's not something that hours because you're procrastinating, but those two combinations become your strengths. That becomes why you take a risk. That becomes why you want to focus on pieces of your business plan versus others. And when you're able to start to marry those two things together, that's where the confidence will come in. So this little Wonder Woman on the right-hand side. But it is funny. We've heard of power poses and, all of that. And really, when you fundamentally break it down, it is what you're good at and what makes you happy. So I know that we're going to talk more about that in our second session, which is going to be strengths-based leadership. Super excited about that. We're going to dive into how you identify your strengths, how it carries over, how you can start to lead with your strengths as well. So we'll cover all that in part 2 of the session. Some additional resources for you. I know I gave you some assessments out there. I have links to those here as well in terms of resources for understanding blind spots. There's also a few blogs that I came across that I felt did a really nice job of summarizing them and helping to understand how to address them so that they don't impact your business plan. And the second section here rather is around just business planning. Again, business planning is absolutely critical. It is not only good enough to create the plan, but continue to move that plan along and then revisit the plan. SCORE has some fantastic resources around how to do this. So I put sort of the top 3 ones here. And then the last one is a podcast. So I'm obsessed with podcasts as well. But there's a great podcast, the Mindset Reset Radio. And so, obviously 90 different ones. I couldn't choose just one. I think if you go through it, you're going to find one that's probably relevant to the topic of interest for you. And then the last one, if you haven't done so already, please go out and register for our second session of successful strategies for women and specifically strength-based leadership. So I will end with this, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. But if you have any questions, even beyond today's session, please feel free. Krishna's graciously will take in all the questions, and then he and I will meet and we'll make sure that we get back to anyone that has questions after today's session. But for now, I'll turn it back over if we want to do some Q&A.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Very, very interesting. A couple of questions that I think come right to mind. One of them is when you're looking at the feedback, and you did say to ask, but who do you ask? Do you ask friends? Do you ask business associates? Do you ask people that you've interacted with in some form? I wasn't quite sure. Who would I ask?
Sure. That's a great question. And I say it's a combination. It depends on the business, but I would definitely say ask friends or family. You want to ask people who are familiar with you. So, for example, you wouldn't want to ask somebody that you were in a meeting with once. You would ask somebody, maybe if you were on a project with them for a longer period of time, where they could get to know your working style, get to know even you personally, maybe. Those are the individuals that you would ask. So if it was a quick interaction, I wouldn't ask that person. If it's somebody who is on, I would say even the peripheral of your network, so you're not interacting with them frequently, like a friend of a friend, I wouldn't ask, but your friend, I would ask. Does that help?
Yes, but what I was thinking was, so I've made a presentation to a group of people about a business idea that I have,
Mhm.
and I've met them before, let's say.
Mhm.
Would I be asking those people individually, so what did you think? Did you like my presentation? Was it strong? Was it weak? Where would you
Yep.
think I should beef it up? I mean, is that what you're talking about when you're feedback's
Yes.
got many different aspects to it.
It does. It does. So there's the feedback in terms of the personal component, right? Those strengths and weaknesses. And then there's the feedback in terms of the business plan or the topic. And so if you're looking for the feedback specific to your business, absolutely ask those people that you've shared the idea with. They will be a tremendous value in terms of, well, the pitch needed to be tighter. You're missing this was, it was really confusing to me who you were marketing to or your ultimate customer. So I would say for sure, if you're sharing your business idea with them or even reviewing your plan with somebody, definitely ask for feedback. I think that just becomes a dialogue and they're there to help answer any questions or point out things that are clear in your mind, maybe, but it's not coming off as clear to the audience.
Yes, that's something that I've seen a lot of times. That's why I was just curious.
Yes, that's a
Now,
good
when you were
question.
talking about blind spots, okay, and you did give some ways, I guess, that you could identify them. But when you're looking at yourself in the mirror, you never really see any.
Mhm.
How do you sort of get your mind to think about that?
Yeah. So for me, I think for anyone, right, it comes down to a couple of things. One, self-reflection. They're not always going to be obvious to you. Assessments are good. Asking,
Like
this is
does the feedback part come into this too?
the
in a
feedback
sense?
comes, yes, the feedback comes into it as well, right? What am I missing? And I'll use myself as an example. I recently took the saboteurs assessment when I was going through that as a coaching program, right? So I took the saboteurs assessment. It came back as sort of, here's the saboteurs that you have, and they define saboteurs by things that you inherently develop at a young age. They're the way in which you react to situations. For me, when I read it, I thought, oh, well, this is a strength. But really, when you started to dive into it, it said, here's how you can come off to others. Because you're so, for me, I'm very focused on the outcome. Well, I have to take more time, right? Because I can come off to others as maybe I don't care or something like that's a blind spot, right? I would have never thought about how I came off to others because I'm so focused on what I'm doing. So it is those assessments. I think it's very difficult to just look in the mirror and say, what am I good at? What am I not good at? Without either tools or feedback from others, or questions to help you self-reflect and spending that time to develop and identify those blind spots.
Okay. So here's to me, somewhat of a practical question that everyone faces, especially women, I think. You need money to start your business. You've made a good business plan. You think it works out well. You've checked it out with asked feedback from different people. So now you have to go to the bank, okay, because you want to get a loan. So here's where all of that chit chat about confidence and everything else. How do you psych yourself up to feel like you're going to make a great presentation, the bank's going to love you, and they're going to jump right in with a check? Get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I think that's the
absolutely. I think it's always that nerve. I think there's confidence and then there's also nerves, right? Which in those types of situations, I think it is sort of intimidating. I would again say sort of reflect. If you've done your homework, there's no reason why you shouldn't be confident. If you honed your business plan, right? I mean, if you walk in there with just a draft business plan and expect a check, then I could understand why your confidence might be shaky, right? Because it's only a one way, like it's only your vision on that plan that you're trying to convey. But if you're going through the process of creating the plan, if you're working with if you have a SCORE mentor, if you don't have one, get one. If you're working with them, I do feel like a lot of the questions that the bank will ask and the messaging of your business that you're going to convey to the bank, you're going to know that like the back of your hand because you've spent so much time in your homework. It's similar to it's similar to an exam, right? When you were in school, if you do your homework and you do the work, there's no reason why you should be going in. Is there a chance that they could say no? I mean, there's always that chance, but at least control whatever's within your span of control. And if you don't go, it's 100% chance that they're going to say no, right? And if they say no, honestly, I hate to say it's a learning experience, but if they say no, then you can go back and say, can you please give me feedback? What were they, maybe there was something missing from the financial component of it for them. Maybe it was something that honestly was outside your area of control. Like it had more to do with their business than your business plan. So I think that's always a learning experience, but I believe that from a psych yourself up confidence, look over that plan, look at all the conversations you've had, get feedback when you exhaust it and are ready to go in. You should have the confidence again, because you've done all of your homework.
So social media is a really big part of this whole story. I mean, probably humongous part. And so how do you get yourself confident enough to do a YouTube presentation or to just be a presentation on your product or try to get people to be followers of yours? I realize it's for another event, but having said that, it's all ties into what you were talking about with the confidence factor, etc. What advice are you giving on that?
So for me, I would say, do what you're comfortable doing. And I don't want to belittle it, but for me, I see, I had to do LinkedIn things, right, for work. And it took a lot because I am not somebody that really loves to see myself on camera. I can be self-critical. I would worry about what will people say. So I toned it down and look at, what can you start to do that you're also comfortable doing? And it might not be starting out of the gate with a, Facebook Live video, right? Or all of a sudden creating a podcast or something like that. It might just be, hey, I'm comfortable writing a blog on this topic, and let me see what sort of, feedback I'm getting on it. Or I'm comfortable following these companies or influencers and chiming in with my own stuff. So I do think that social media is going to be different for everyone. I mean, especially, generationally, I think it's very different. I won't give away my age, but I did not grow up with social media. So I think I'm much more intimidated by it. And when I started to dip my toes in that water, I needed to start out very small. I needed to start out with what I was comfortable doing. Now, I look at even my daughter, she's 15, and, kids around her age, I mean, they have no problem putting videos out and talking about different topics. So it goes back to sort of what you're comfortable with, knowing your market, and starting to dip your toes in it. Don't feel like you have to have that full-blown social media plan that's going to make you jump into all of a sudden doing Facebook Live videos every week.
It's almost like the outgoing person versus the shy person. And there becomes a problem. If you're the shy person and you have a great idea, the confidence factor is something that really has to be built up.
Yeah,
I would imagine that's something that you do in some of the things that you promote.
Yes. And I think I'm more introverted by nature. So I can totally understand it. I read a book a couple years back called Quiet. And and is called Quiet, the Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. But a portion of that book did address specifically social media. And the interesting thing about it was that social media is much kinder, if you will, to introverts. So introverts tend to use it in a different way. I mean, obviously the extroverts are going to be up there. They're going to be, loud and all that, but it's actually given introverts a way to reach out to people that, maybe you didn't want to walk into a networking room of 150 people, but you can start by writing a blog, right? You can start by making comments. You can start by just short little quotes, whatever it might be, to get comfortable with it. Because the reality is you need to figure out how to network. And when you're an introvert, oftentimes social media becomes one of your bigger friends.
Okay, here's an interesting question. How do you suggest women work on finding the balance between not feeling confident and being overconfident? That's tough.
It's such a good question. I would always say, again, going back to know who you are and own that. Not being confident, when you're not confident, you tend to focus on the negatives, right? There's that negative lens that comes into play. I had fallen victim of this earlier in my career as well. I focused on sort of what I wasn't doing good at, or those types of elements, and my confidence waned with that. When I started to flip the script and flip my focus to say, oh, here's what I'm good at. Let me focus on my strengths. The confidence naturally followed that way, if that makes sense. So when you're starting to focus on the positive, when you're starting to focus on here's what I'm good at, which is the positive, I do feel like your confidence will be there. You'll know if you're overly confident. I would always say go into it. I think, again, SCORE is a great checkpoint for me. Like if I'm going into something, I'm like, I know the answer to that. And then a question or two is asked that I don't know the answer to, it's a mental check, like, okay, maybe I need to work on that or find the answer. I don't know everything. But there's a way to be confident and also, ask for help or ask for advice where you need to supplement. But I think it is that balance, but I also feel like confidence follows your lens and what you're going to focus on. If you're going to focus on the negative, if you're going to focus on what you're not good at, or what you haven't done, even, because it's very easy, right? There's so much stuff to get done. But if you focus on what you haven't done, your confidence will start to be pulled down. When you start to focus on, here's what I'm good at, look at your plan, here's everything I've done to date. If you're going to the bank, here's all the conversations I've had, that confidence will go the other way.
Okay, good. Because I'll tell you, it's really a tough situation when you're sort of in the middle. What do you do? Mm-hmm. A or B? Mm-hmm. Yep. Because if you don't come across too confident, nobody wants to do business with you because they think you're kind of wishy-washy and you won't deliver. Yep. So there is a fine line there.
Absolutely. And I think for anyone who's starting or has a business and it's yours, no one knows your business better than you. Right. So reminding yourself of that as well. So when you're not feeling confident and you're having those discussions, Ed, right, you're the one that knows your business. If you make a tiny slip up, they're not going to know, but you know your business. You know why you created, you know where you're going, and you know who you're selling to.
There's a movie on television called The Intern, with Robert De Niro. I don't know if you've seen it. They play it many times.
Yes.
And he's an older man, but he comes on as an intern to this young woman who started this business of clothing. It's really sort of exactly what you're talking about in terms of confidence level. She had a lot of confidence, but he helped her in certain areas that she didn't. It was rather interesting. I kind of recommend people watch it. It's actually quite entertaining. You may have seen it, I hope.
Yeah, I loved it.
Okay,
I loved it, and it's so spot on. So thanks for bringing that up.
Really. Yeah, well, especially when he kind of tells her, we'll be buried together, so you don't have to worry about, the fact that you'll be buried alone. I think that kind of really touched home for her. Anyway, we're right at our appointed time. So we've used up our questions. So I want to thank you very, very much for an excellent presentation. We will see you again on the 28th for the second part of this, which I think will be even more interesting because you're kind of wrapping a lot together. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to our chapter chair, Linda, for some closing remarks. Linda?
Thank you so much, Nicole. That
Thank
was
you.
a fabulous presentation. I'm seeing a whole lot of positive comments come through in the chat. So I thank you so much. There's also a lot of questions about SCORE mentors. Yes, there are SCORE chapters all over the country. There is a chapter that handles the Pottstown area called Tri-County. Of course, we cover Eastern Montgomery and all of Bucks. However, we have a policy called One SCORE. That means if you come to us, we can either direct you to the appropriate chapter or we can take care of you ourselves. We're not territorial in that way. We're happy to help you. Most of our mentoring is done through Zoom. So you can be in Timbuktu and it really doesn't matter as long as you're getting the SCORE mentoring. So I encourage you to go to our website and to ask for a mentor, and we can help you out from there. Once again, Nicole, I just have one comment. I love the stat that said women apply for jobs when they meet 100% of the criteria and men only 50%. To me, that says it all.
That's terrible.
I loved it. I loved it.
It is terrible, but it's
That's
everywhere.
terrible.
It's so true. So again, thank you so much. I look forward to your June 28th presentation. And to all of you on the call, yes, you'll get a copy of the recording, as well as there is a complete library of everything that we have done so far on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. There's a lot on social media, on Google Analytics. There's a whole lot of info out there. So please use those resources. That's what we're here for, to help you. And with that, I'll say I'll see you next Tuesday for I think our session is on insurance, business insurance.
Business liability insurance.
Yes, which is also a key topic. So thanks once again to everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Linda.
you.